You ever wonder what really happens to your soul when your body starts to age? This is a question many avoid, yet it's something everyone secretly fears or ponders in quiet moments. Aging isn't just a physical process, it's a profoundly spiritual journey that few have the courage to discuss openly. While we watch our loved ones grow older or notice the first wrinkles on our own face, a question arises from deep within our mind. What's happening beyond what we can see? If this message is touching something in you, don't forget to click the like button right away and subscribe to the channel for more revelations that can transform how you understand life, death, and everything in between. What many don't know is that, according to Edgar Cayce's revelations, aging isn't an end, it's a glorious beginning. It's a gateway to one of the most significant phases in our soul's eternal journey. Our society has built a wall of silence around aging and death. We celebrate youth, vitality, and the new, while we hide the elderly, medicate their symptoms, and avoid conversations about the end of life. This silence isn't accidental, it's a reflection of our collective fear of the unknown. Edgar Cayce, often called the sleeping prophet, dared to break that silence. During his mediumistic trances at the beginning of the 20th century, Cayce tapped into information that went beyond the medical and spiritual knowledge of his time. While most spiritual and religious leaders only offered vague promises about what lies beyond, Cayce described in minute detail what happens to our essence when our body embarks on its final journey. The most surprising part? His descriptions weren't dogmatic or based on fear. They were messages of hope, purpose, and continuity. Cayce wasn't afraid to talk about aging because in his visions he saw the sublime beauty of this process. The usual view tells us that growing old means deteriorating, losing abilities, diminishing. But Cayce saw something radically different, a process of spiritual expansion, where the soul gradually begins to free itself from the limitations of the physical body. Think of old age not as a twilight, but as a dawn. According to Cayce, when the body ages, the soul experiences a gentle release from the material shackles that once kept it focused on earthly concerns. It's like, over decades, we've been wearing glasses that only let us see the material world, and now, slowly, those glasses are being taken off. The elderly aren't losing abilities, they're gaining new perspectives. While the world only sees wrinkles, white hair, and slower movements, Cayce saw an expanding aura, a blossoming consciousness, a soul preparing for its most important flight. This is why so many elderly people seem to develop an almost inexplicable wisdom, a knack for seeing through the illusions that once seemed so important. It's no coincidence that nearly every ancient culture revered the elderly as those closest to the divine. They really do have one foot in each realm. Have you noticed how many elderly people begin experiencing phenomena that conventional medicine quickly labels as confusion or dementia? Cayce offers a radically different take on many of these symptoms. When an older person starts seeing people who have long since passed away, medicine calls it an hallucination. Cayce suggests it's a sign that perception is expanding beyond the veil that separates worlds. When they talk with invisible beings, they're not necessarily delusional. They might be experiencing the first contact with realities that have always existed beyond our limited perception. One particularly remarkable phenomenon is terminal lucidity. That moment when gravely ill or very elderly people who had been confused for weeks or months suddenly become completely clear-minded just hours or days before passing. Science can't adequately explain this phenomenon. But in Cayce's readings, we find an explanation. The soul is completing its transition, reconciling its two realities, preparing for the big leap. Another often overlooked sign is the intensification of dreams. Many elderly people report vivid dreams, encounters with deceased family members, or visits to places that are unknown, yet strangely familiar. Neuroscience might say these are just altered brain functions, but Cayce saw them as the awakening of the soul's awareness to its true nature, a preparation for returning home to the spirit world. And we can't ignore the growing sensitivity that many develop to colors, sounds, and the energy of those around them. This hypersensitivity isn't a weakness, it's a refinement of the spiritual senses gradually replacing the dominance of the physical ones. Have you noticed how many elderly people feel an almost physical need to resolve past conflicts? This isn't just an emotional impulse, it's a deep spiritual necessity that Cayce described in impressive detail. According to Cayce's readings, as we approach our final transition, our soul naturally begins a process of inventory and release. The hurts, resentments, and guilt we've carried aren't just emotional burdens. They are literally dense energies that can hinder the soul's passage into the subtler realms after the body's death. That's why so many older people seek reconciliation in unexpected ways. That grandmother who suddenly wants to talk with the son she hasn't seen in decades. That father who, lying in a hospital bed, asks to see the friend he'd fallen out with. This isn't sentimentality, it's instinctive spiritual wisdom. Cayce revealed that forgiveness in old age operates on multiple levels simultaneously. When an elderly person forgives, they're not just releasing the other, they're literally dissolving energetic knots that tie their soul to limiting experiences. It's a spiritual alchemy where the lead of past hurts turns into the gold of liberation. A fascinating phenomenon observed in many nursing homes and hospitals is how people who were once tough and inflexible often develop an amazing ability to forgive and accept in their final phase. This isn't weakness or resignation, it's the soul's wisdom recognizing what really matters on the great spiritual journey. One of the most beautiful yet misunderstood processes of aging is the gradual detachment from the ego's identifications. Society sees this as a loss, but Cayce recognized it as the deepest gain. Notice how many elderly people seem increasingly unconcerned with status, appearances, or material achievements. While the world might judge this as apathy, Cayce identified a profound spiritual process at work. The soul is naturally releasing the anchors that kept it tied to the illusion of separation. The powerful CEO who now finds joy simply watching birds outside the window. The socialite who gives up jewelry and makeup to feel the sun on her face without worry. The intellectual who sets aside books just to be present with grandchildren. They aren't losing their identities, they're finally discovering who they really are beyond social roles. Cayce explained that over a lifetime we build layers of identity based on our achievements, relationships, possessions, and external recognition. In old age, the soul naturally begins peeling away these layers, gearing up to return to its essential state. It's like an actor who, after decades of playing characters, finally takes off the makeup and costumes to reveal his true face. This process can be scary to an outside observer, and sometimes even to the elderly person experiencing it. But it's precisely this detachment that allows consciousness to expand beyond the limits of a worldly personality. When an older person seems to no longer care about the things that once defined them, they aren't losing themselves, they're finding themselves on a deeper level. One of the most practical and transformative insights from Cayce's readings is about the crucial influence of the physical, emotional, and energetic environment during aging and transition. Cayce was emphatic. The environment around an elderly person isn't just about comfort, it's a determining factor for the quality of their spiritual experience. The energies, emotions, and thoughts surrounding a person in their final years literally shape the vibrational field through which the soul will travel. Think of an elderly person's room not just as a physical space, but as a spiritual womb where a new form of existence is being nurtured. The colors on the walls, the ambient sounds, and the emotions of those coming and going, all these create vibrational waves that can either ease or hinder the expansion of consciousness. When family members argue at the bedside of an elderly person, mistakenly believing they don't perceive anything, they're creating dissonance in the energetic field precisely when the soul is most sensitive. When they whisper words of love, gratitude, and permission to depart, they're literally building a bridge of light through which consciousness can pass smoothly. Cayce stressed the importance of loving physical touch, even and perhaps especially when the body is frail. A touch conveys more than physical comfort. It anchors the soul in love as it prepares to let go of material ties. A hand holding another can be the perfect anchor that helps the soul navigate between realms safely, knowing it can return to the body whenever needed. Music, according to Cayce, holds a special power in this phase of life. Certain harmonies can literally tune the consciousness to frequencies that ease the transition between dimensions. It's no coincidence that many elderly people nearing the end of life respond so deeply to the music of their youth or to sacred melodies, even when nothing else seems to move them. One of the most fascinating and often misunderstood aspects of aging is the expanded perception that many elderly people experience. Far from being symptoms to be medicated, Cayce saw them as precious evidence of the gradual transition of consciousness between different planes of existence. It's remarkably common for older individuals, especially those nearing the final transition, to report visions of deceased beings, places that are unknown yet familiar, or lights and colors that others can't see. Conventional medicine quickly labels these experiences as hallucinations, delirium, or side effects of medications. But Cayce offered a much deeper explanation. As the bond between the soul and the physical body naturally loosens, consciousness begins to perceive realities that have always existed parallel to ours, yet remain hidden by the density of material perception. When your grandma says she's chatting with the grandpa who passed away decades ago, she isn't necessarily confused. Her perception is stretching beyond the veil separating dimensions. When your elderly father describes a man of light by his bedside that no one else can see, he might be coming into contact with spiritual guides who help with his transition. Particularly significant are the vivid dreams many elderly individuals report. Cayce explained that during sleep, especially in old age, the soul travels more freely, reconnecting with the spiritual realm, revisiting the Akashic records, that universal memory, and even preparing abodes in the subtle realms. When an elderly person wakes up and tells a dream in which they were home, but describes a place they've never visited in this life, they might be catching genuine glimpses of their spiritual home. A phenomenon documented by caregivers in hospices around the world is the consistent description that many patients give of visitors, invisible to the physical eye, in the weeks or days leading up to their passing. These accounts bear impressive similarities even among people of differing cultures and beliefs. Cayce explained that these are literally guides and loved ones coming to meet the soul that is preparing for transition, offering guidance and comfort, and assuring that nobody undertakes this journey alone. There's a deeply spiritual reason why so many people, at life's end, have intense moments of reflection about regrets, missed opportunities, and unchosen paths. According to Cayce, this isn't just a psychological process of review, it's an essential spiritual work of integration that prepares the soul for its next journey. When an elderly person repeatedly revisits the same memories, especially those laden with sorrow or regret, they aren't merely ruminating, they're literally working to heal and integrate fragmented parts of their consciousness before transition. Cayce explained that every meaningful life experience creates an energetic imprint that needs to be processed and integrated into the totality of who we are. The experiences we couldn't fully integrate during our active years naturally come to the surface during the final phase, seeking resolution. This is why psychologists and caregivers of the elderly often notice that in the final weeks or months, many people seem to undertake intensive inner work, sometimes voicing deep insights about life patterns they'd never noticed before. Medicine might see this as simple reminiscence, but Cayce acknowledged it as a sophisticated process of soul healing. Particularly powerful is that final moment of letting go. Cayce described with sensitivity how, at a certain point in the process, the soul makes a conscious choice to release the ties that keep it bound to the physical plane. Experienced caregivers often report that they can sense when someone reaches this point. It's a subtle yet profound change in the quality of their presence, a serenity that goes beyond mere physical relaxation. It's common for people who have been fighting death for weeks or months to suddenly find peace, often after some significant event, like the visit of a specific person, the resolution of an old conflict, or even after receiving permission from a loved one to depart. Cayce explained that these aren't just psychological triggers, but deeply spiritual moments of resolution, when the soul accepts that it's done what it came to do and is ready for its next chapter. One of Cayce's most profound revelations about aging goes beyond the individual and ties into humanity's collective purpose. According to his readings, the elderly aren't merely individuals finishing their personal cycles. They are living repositories of accumulated wisdom that drive the evolution of human consciousness. In an age that idolizes the new and discards the old, Cayce offered a radically different vision. Every elderly person is a living library, holding not just the memories of one life, but the distilled wisdom of multiple existences. When a society loses its connection with its elders, it loses access to a unique kind of knowledge that you can't find in books or databases. The lived wisdom that only emerges from the soul's direct experience through many cycles of existence. What many call elder wisdom isn't simply the result of decades of experience. It's, according to Cayce, the natural blossoming of deeper soul insights that had been temporarily obscured by the concerns of active life. As distractions fade and consciousness expands, truths that have always been at the soul's core begin to emerge in crystal clear clarity. This explains why so many indigenous and ancient traditions maintained councils of elders to guide crucial community decisions. It wasn't just a matter of respect. It was a practical recognition that through the elderly, the community could access a form of timeless collective intelligence. When we truly listen to an elderly person, we're not just honoring an individual, we're participating in a sacred transmission that sustains the continuity of human consciousness across generations. Every shared story, every offered piece of advice, every blessing from an elder is a thread in the tapestry that connects the past to the future, the seen to the unseen, the temporal to the eternal. That's why Cayce emphasized that how we treat our elders isn't just a matter of social ethics. It's a direct indicator of our collective spiritual maturity and our ability to recognize the multidimensional nature of human existence. What Edgar Cayce ultimately invites us to do is completely revolutionize our view of aging. Not as a tragic end to be feared or a medical problem to be managed, but as a sacred initiation, perhaps the most important one we'll ever experience in our earthly journey. Imagine how different our world would be if we treated every wrinkle not as a flaw to be corrected, but as a portal of wisdom to be honored. If we saw every white hair not as a sign of decay, but as a crown of light earned through countless soulful experiences. If we recognized every slower step not as fragility, but as the natural rhythm of someone gradually tuning in to subtler frequencies of existence. This isn't a romantic or idealized view, it's deeply practical. When we begin to see aging through the lens that Cayce offers, we naturally change the way we interact with the elders in our families and communities. We start listening to their stories, not out of obligation or duty, but because we recognize that they might hold the keys to our own existential mysteries. We offer them our full presence, not just as an act of compassion, but as a conscious participation in a universal rite of passage that one day will be our own. Cayce's readings also provide surprisingly precise practical guidance on how we can help with this transition process. He talked about the importance of soft colors in the environments of the elderly, especially shades of blue and violet, which vibrate at frequencies that support the expansion of consciousness. He mentioned how certain plants and essential oils, particularly lavender, sandalwood, and rose can create energetic fields that soften the boundary between dimensions. Perhaps the most powerful piece of advice from Cayce is about the transformative strength of loving, mindful presence. When we are truly present with an elderly person, not just physically, but with full attention, an open heart, and high intention, we literally create a resonant field that acts as a bridge between worlds. Our loving presence becomes the safe boat that helps the soul navigate between realms, knowing it can return to the body as needed. If you have elders in your family or social circle, maybe now is the time to radically change the way you're with them. Replace indifference with reverence, swap impatience for curiosity, exchange discomfort for openness. Ask yourself, what if this person isn't losing abilities but gaining a form of perception I still don't understand? What if every moment with them is a chance to glimpse a dimension of existence that normally stays hidden? Before we say goodbye for today, I'd like to ask something special. Share in the comments your experience with elders in your life. Have there been moments when you felt they were connected to something greater? Situations where they said something surprisingly deep or demonstrated a perception that went beyond the obvious? Your stories aren't just inspiring, they're precious evidence of the soul's journey that Edgar Cayce described. There's a transcendent beauty in the view that Edgar Cayce offers us about the cycle of life, death, and rebirth. Unlike perspectives that see death as a definitive end or as a jump into an unchanging eternal destination, Cayce revealed the rhythmic, progressive nature of the soul's journey. Aging seen from this perspective isn't the end of a straight line, but a specific point in a great circle, the moment when the soul starts to bend its trajectory, preparing to complete one cycle and begin another. It's both an end and a beginning, a conclusion and a preparation. What makes this view especially comforting is the understanding that nothing truly valuable ever gets lost. The connections we make, the love we share, the lessons we learn, they all become part of the immortal essence of who we are. We don't just carry memories, we carry fundamental transformations in our spiritual makeup that persist long after the physical body dissolves. Cayce described how, after transition, the soul goes through a period of review, integration, and planning, not as an external judgment, but as a natural process of self-assessment and growth. This period, which might feel like moments or ages depending on the perspective of consciousness, lays the groundwork for new expressions and experiences. Perhaps the most revolutionary aspect of Cayce's revelations is the idea that we aren't simply repeating purposeless cycles, we're spiraling toward ever higher levels of consciousness and capacity to love. Each life, each death, each rebirth moves us one step further along the grand journey of the soul toward a conscious reuniting with the source of all existence. This perspective deeply transforms our relationship with the elderly in their final journeys. We aren't witnessing a tragic loss, we're seeing the momentary culmination of a specific expression of eternal consciousness, which will soon find new ways of manifesting and growing. By contemplating the mystery of aging and death through the lens of Cayce's wisdom, perhaps we can finally free ourselves from the fear that has haunted humanity for millennia. Perhaps we can start seeing the cycle of life with the same balance and calm with which we observe the seasons, recognizing that winter isn't the end of life, but the necessary preparation for a new spring. So as we accompany our loved ones in their final journeys on this earthly plane, we can whisper in their ears and hearts the deepest truth that Cayce revealed to us. There's no goodbye, only see you later. The circle never breaks. Love is never lost. The soul never dies. And somewhere, sometime, we'll meet again and recognize each other. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to access more stories like this. Life is eternal. Consciousness is continuous. And love, the love is the force that connects every cycle, every dimension, every expression of the infinite cosmic dance in which we all take part.